So now let's take a look and understand the key differences, advantages and disadvantages with the different shipping methods. So when you're sourcing internationally, you're going to be shipping either of two ways, by air or by sea. Now I realize there's a few of us out there who may be in more of a unique situation. We might be sourcing a product from, let's say, Canada or Mexico, and you might be shipping your product to the United States via ground. But for the most part, the majority of us will be shipping by air or by sea. Each one has its own advantages and disadvantages. So when shipping by air, as we all know, it's very fast. And your first product is most likely going to be shipped via air. If you've been following the ASM business model, you're zeroing in on products that are relatively light in weight, and we're not ordering a huge amount for our first order anyways. It's going to be quite a small amount because we want to test the market. You can use an express service like DHL, FedEx, UPS, etc. They're the most common, but there are some smaller carriers out there as well. Now here's a little tip. Using your supplier's account is usually the most economical solution. And in fact, in all cases when I've made my price comparisons, my suppliers were always able to get better pricing than I could get myself. Now, there are some people out there who have gone out and opened their own account with DHL or FedEx. You can also open international accounts, and they've got some pretty competitive pricing. So I would suggest that if anybody's concerned about this, get a pricing quote from your supplier. See what they can do. Call DHL or FedEx yourself, and maybe look at opening up an account, an international account, and seeing what kind of pricing they can give you, and do a thorough comparison. Now, the second consideration with air shipping is it does have a higher per unit cost. It's more expensive than shipping by sea, but sea is really only practical with larger quantities. So you have to weigh that higher unit cost with the opportunity cost. You know, if it takes you a month or a month and a half to receive your goods via sea, well, that's a month or a month and a half we've kind of wasted where you could have been selling goods. Even, yes, maybe at a reduced profit margin, but you're selling goods, you're getting in the game, you're getting experience, and you're building your business. Now, some people I know who have lightweight products, and they've been selling for years, and they sell hundreds of units a day of these various products, always ship by air. Now, they're in a really great situation where they have a very lightweight product, but they just love the idea of shipping by air because they can keep a very tight control on inventory. They're never sitting there waiting, another 2-3 weeks to go by sea. They can just bam, 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 send it in and keep a tight handle on inventory. That's not the case for most of us. Some of us, yes. Most of us, as we're ramping up our business, there's going to be a point where we're going to want to start to consider and then look at using sea shipping just for the absolute cost savings of our products. Obviously, if you have a very heavy product, you might want to consider sea shipping earlier than other people. And when you're shipping by express, the product will usually arrive in the US within about 3 days. So finally, shipping by air is really easy to do. Arranging the shipping yourself or having your supplier do so via an express service is really quick, really easy, and it's something your suppliers do all the time. So if you have any anxiety or any doubt or concern about having that done, you can always have your supplier take care of that. Now, there may be some suppliers that don't, but the overwhelming majority that I've dealt with, they do this all the time and they're very used to it. You do not need to have a freight forwarder. Now, a freight forwarder is simply an agent that handles the shipping. So for instance, when you're shipping by sea, you will need a freight forwarder, and they're the ones that will take possession of those goods, clear customs, make sure duties are paid, all those types of things. You don't have to worry about that when you're shipping by express. The express company, DHL or FedEx, whoever you're using, they technically are the freight forwarder in this situation, and they just handle it. You don't really have any involvement with that. You just basically pay for it, tell them where to ship it, and it's done. Quite simple. And really, it is the most ideal way to get your business up and running quickly when you're sourcing overseas. So in sea shipping, it is a lot slower. 15 to 30 days on the water is the typical range you'll sort of find from Asia to the United States, depending upon the ports you're shipping from and to. Now, it's going to take some time to load and unload the ship as well, then ship via ground to FBA. So what I mean is, for example, if you're shipping from China to the United States, they may require you to have your goods at the port a week before the ship sets sail. That gives them time to register the goods, load them on, etc. Then let's say your ship takes 20 days to cross the ocean. Well, when it arrives at the port in the United States, they might need 3 or 4 or 5 days to unload the ship. Once it's unloaded, then you ship those products to FBA Fulfillment Center. All that takes time, and you just have to be aware that you have an accurate assessment of how long that takes. So it's not just the typical time on the water you have to look at. You have to look at sort of those two shoulders on each side as well. Now, obviously, when you're shipping by sea, it's best done with large shipments and when you're not pressed for time. So the biggest advantage when you're shipping by sea, of course, is the cheaper per unit cost versus air. The trade-off of here, of course, is time, but it can be very economical when you're shipping in volume. Here's a little tip. If you are concerned about the timing and running out of inventory and while preparing or waiting on a sea shipment, you can cover the gaps with smaller air shipments. So, for example, when your business is ramping up and you're at a time and a place where for your particular product it's starting to make more sense to ship by sea and get that bigger volume, while you're waiting for that shipment to be sent, if you have any concerns about timing and running out of inventory, simply work with your supplier and make sure they have a smaller shipment that can be sent via air to make sure you don't run out of inventory. People do this all the time, so you're not sitting around tapping your fingers waiting for that sea shipment to come across and get unloaded. Just fire some over by air in the meantime. Over time, as you start to ship by sea, that will get more and more smoothed out. You're going to have more and more volume in stock. You're not going to be running it so tight as you are when you're first starting. When you're first starting, yep, you're probably going to run out of inventory a few times. It's not the end of the world. But as you become more established, you start to really smooth out those timelines. And this is just a nice way to just make sure you don't run out of inventory for too long. So the final consideration with shipping by sea is that it is a more complicated process. Now, although that's true that it's more complicated, I don't want to let that stop or intimidate you. And here's why. When you use a freight forwarder and let the experts handle what they do best for you, you let them handle the customs, the duties, the paperwork, etc., etc. A good freight forwarder will seamlessly bring your goods into the country. It's that simple. I like to compare it to when someone's car breaks down. If your car is having trouble, you don't run to a store and buy a manual on how to fix it. That's not our job. Let the professionals handle it, and you'll find that the entire process of shipping by sea isn't nearly as scary as some people make it out to be. Now, there's a lot of freight forwarders out there. I would strongly suggest you phone 3, 4, 5, 6 of them, get a quote from them, get a cost comparison, and get a feel for how they do business. A relationship with a good freight forwarder really pays for itself, and it makes the whole process just super simple. Now, the final note on this video regarding international shipping is a cost of doing business. You have to realize we're all in the same boat. You, me, Walmart, any other retailer that is bringing in goods from anywhere. As time goes on, your shipping costs will decrease. In fact, many of your costs will decrease. You're scaling up your business. You're getting more and more units manufactured. You might be hitting various price tiers, etc., etc. So you can really leverage that. Shipping is no different. So I don't want you to get discouraged by this. You just have to account for it. And your first product order is typically very small. So you might find that it's maybe a bit disproportionate, the shipping portion. And it's going to cut into your profit margins. Don't worry about this. That will change as you ramp up your sales and increase your order sizes. And in fact, I know a lot of very successful sellers out there who even to this day will, if they're looking at a new product, they'll be bringing that product in a very small amount. They'll ignore profit margins. They'll bring things at a break even or a very small profit margin just to test that product. Now, I'm not saying you do that. I mean, we always want to have some profit margin there. It's great. But even if your profit margins are reduced, it's not a big deal because those will start to increase. I know for myself personally, I was sort of originally estimating my very first product. I thought, oh, geez, I'll be in the 25 to 30% profit margin range. Well, when it started shipping by air, my profit margins were, 10, 12, maybe 15% if I was lucky, and I was a little bit discouraged. But it wasn't long before it started to creep up as my orders got bigger and bigger and your Amazon business starts to snowball. I now sit anywhere from 35 to 45% on average for most of my products. But when I started, those are down around 10%, and it's just scaling things up. So I really don't want you to be discouraged for your very first product order, because let's face it, that first order is probably going to be 100 units or 50 units or 200 units. It's not going to be a lot, and your shipping costs are going to be a heavier part of the equation than you might originally anticipate. So don't let it bug you, and I'll see you in the next video.